Hey, film friends, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film, a podcast where we break down movies with some of my closest friends and special guests. But this time, I'm flying solo again, baby. Just me and a nonagenarian who's proven he still has the chops and the artistic eye to make major productions look easy. I was trying to find a way to combine ease, wood, and easy, but it just didn't fall. Guys, it's Clint Eastwood's new but old legal thriller, Juror number 2. Okay, so, it's like, where do we start here, guys? Like, usually I start with some major themes, plot, things like that. But for this one, I'm always interested, you guys know, about the stories and the things coming out surrounding pictures as much as what's going on inside. And the rollout for this movie, guys, it's insane. Just insane. Seems like a weird place to begin, but I'm wondering how many of you have actually even seen this. I mean, and I think the question could be asked, like, why? I mean, it's Eastwood. Wouldn't it go wide, Nick? No, actually not. So now we got to talk about Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was founded in 1923 by four brothers. No, sorry, couldn't help myself. The brothers' names were Harry, Al. No, okay, that's not where we're going. We're not going that far back. Let's stick to the most recent past and present. But this is insane. I mean, think about it. Major studio, one of the few bastions left. I mean, even with all the mergers and shifts and those small indie shingles, kind of getting under the bigger tents of the major studios, this is still the WB, baby. I mean, this is the place of Nolan, at least at first, Kubrick, Scorsese, George Miller. Oh, here's another, Clint Eastwood. Ever heard of him? And yet, any guesses on how many theaters this actually rolled out to in the U.S.? Well, let's see. Plus or minus 40, let's just say if you had the under, then you just became a lot wealthier. But the question is why? I mean, you see, studios do this kind of stuff all the time, right? They shelve things, they sit on it, they kick it down the road. But usually it's because of troubled productions or rewrites or studio interference or whatever. And then when we watch them, if we're perceptive viewers, we pick it up. We're like, whoa, whew, that was rough. So here's your first quick spoiler warning. This film is none of those things. So what are the reasons? Like, why is this happening as it is? Well, I have a couple theories. Number one, the WB is in debt after a merger with Discovery. So I think they're worried. I think dollar signs, as they always are at play here, first of all. Second of all, I'm wondering if a modest theatrical release was the plan before going much wider with streaming. And so I think genre could be playing an effect here. I mean, think about it. Like Presumed Innocent, the Scott Turow work. It got a remake this year on Apple TV Plus. Did really well. So maybe it was a good move to go to streamers. But here's why I'm making this point. Even while being so grounded, this picture is so cinematic. It's like I just don't get it. Like it deserves to be seen by people on the biggest screens possible. And I'm always advocating for that, but this one is crazy. And the reason ultimately why is this. This is the best film Eastwood has made in a very long time. So, all right, what is it? Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk basics of plot. You've got a man who's selected to be a juror in a trial, in a murder trial, in fact. So the story sets us up pretty quick. Like, I'm not really doing spoilers here. This is right in the trailer, which I've always told you guys, don't watch trailers. But this is what's going on. Here's the real basic contours of plot. This couple, they're at a bar. They're talking. Things get a little serious and heated. A drink gets thrown, and now she takes off out the door. Apparently, this was fairly common for this couple. Now she's outside in the rain. And of course, being that this is the 2020s, someone's got their cell phone camera out and they're grabbing all of this. So they got them out in the rain. They got them they got them fighting. The couple argues some, and then she splits. You see her go after her, and that's when our sort of like first-person POV, as we're watching these events unfold, that's where it ends. So somehow the story progresses from there, her walking to her car in the rain, to her dead in a ditch amongst a pile of rocks. And so the implication is like her head was bashed in, she fell, who knows, right? But again, now we're back at the top and we're like, who cares about juror number two? Why is that the title of this movie? Is Eastwood just gone senile? The answer is no, because this man has become a juror, and as he starts to hear the details of the case unfold, he gets a sick deja vu feeling like he may have actually been around the couple that night. Ooh, okay. Talk about a great elevator pitch, right? Am I the one that did the crime that I'm now hearing about? Am I misremembering what happened? Ooh. So now we're here. But interestingly, this is just a courtroom drama. I mean, we're talking like a John Grisham down the middle legal drama. Scott Turow, this stuff like so many of us grew up with in the 90s. People grandstanding in courts, jurors deliberating in back rooms, a la 12 Angry Men, to quote a classic. But when you combine all of that with, which is just kind of in our DNA, if you watch any of those films, from watching the genre with Eastwood's natural penchant for plain spoken drama, just that's just what this guy does. His best stuff is never fancy. It's just forthright, sturdy genre flicks, man. And when he's humming, when Eastwood's cooking, you get lean, taut thrillers. Which, guys, can I just say, like, as an aside, 100 minutes on this movie. I mean, can I get an amen? How many freaking movies? It's like in order to be prestige or voted for any major body, things got to hum up over 2.5 hours. Like, my God, please, unless it's The Godfather, spare me. 100 minutes is perfect. It's like the rapture happened and they only took the editors. Okay, that's like a sort of a deep cut religious joke. You may need to Google that, or maybe just let it lie. Anyway, the point is that you got this little gem. It's in and out, 100 minutes. A film that feels classic and timeless, yet is still obviously in the way that the case unfolds of the moment. So on the one hand, like I said, this is a mid-90s cable movie, but on the other, it goes in these entirely new directions. And the reason why I think it's significant is thematics. Like, thematically, this is interesting. So, what is the theme? Well, it's not steamy. It's not a steamy movie. And then you're like, okay, steamy, what are you talking about? Well, just think about it. I mean, like, journey back with me. You guys remember all the sweat on all the bodies in the Deep South in A Time to Kill? Or how about the crazy tension between Denzel and Julia Roberts in Pakula's the Pelican Brief? I mean, that movie goes in crazy places if the studio systems were ready to put interracial couples together in 93. But, instead it goes other places. Or Sidney Pollack's The Firm. My point is that there was just always something like a little titillating alongside the actual legal stuff. But that's actually not what's going on here. I mean, there's intrigue, sure, but to me, it's closer to something much more personal, like Paul Newman's The Verdict, than something hot or sexy or melodramatic. I mean, one of the pods that I'm fond of said that this is a classical moral exploration of personal and institutional failure. I mean, that's it. Like, drop the friggin' mic. This is a movie about the complexities of justice and the power of individual conscience. So I'm throwing things at you and you're like, okay, well, what does that actually mean, right? My point is that it's a strong work on inner morality that uses a fairly standard courtroom drama to build up that story. But I do think that everything I just said does kind of beg a question, which is that, is this a movie about personal moralism? The main players in this movie deciding what are the right and wrong things to do, the actions to take, and whether or not they're going to do them, even at the expense of their own health, life, well-being, promotion in the case of the DA with Toni Collette? Or is it more subtle demands for institutional reform? And it sounds crazy, but like, look, I mean, you guys, this is what Eastwood's been doing. This dude he's got his foot on the gas at 94. He's still making movies with trenchant commentary about things. So he's not afraid to like take things to task. And I think he's doing that there. I think this is a legal thriller with a heavy conscience. I mean, like I said, the personal moral choices here are very hard. They're gray areas. It's not a black and white movie, which I think differentiates it from some of the other movies I mentioned before. And it's at its best. Juror number two is humming when it's testing its lead's morality, and then in turn putting us in the awkward position of whether we buy it, whether we're playing along, and therefore becoming eager accomplices, or discarding it, or saying this is wrong, this is right, do it. But I would be lying if I said that, like I said, the Eastwood's still taking things to task. There's still critical observations about the American judicial system. I mean, look, this could have happened back then. It could have happened in the 60s, the 90s, and or now. I mean, and I think the point of that is that the legal system hasn't really changed. Things don't change that much in this country in that way. Guilt, truth, reasonable doubt. And what I love is, J.K. Simmons' character. This guy is this is a minor spoiler. He comes in, he's a juror, and all of a sudden it turns out like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm holding an ace up my sleeve. I'm a former detective, and this case sounds fishy. Okay, cool. But then, through the machinations of the plot, what Eastwood brilliantly does is he sticks all this bureaucratic red tape around this dude, and it screws the one expert out of the film. So it's like, okay, we finally got a ringer, and we can't even do anything with it. And I think it's the same thing with the archetypal characters, all the people that are sitting in the jury, and they're sort of espousing viewpoints, but it's allowing the director to push on ways that the system itself is broken. So look, I mean, how you'd say, like, okay, well, what about the actual construction of the film? Sound design, cinematography, realism. Well, this is Eastwood. Everything is unfussy. His style is lean. Eastwood's whole thing is it's like one take Clint, right? We get everything in. We take one or two shots of this stuff. He's the anti-Fincher. We get in. We take one or two shots. We're out by lunch. Maybe I'm golfing by 1 p.m. I don't know. I'm just making that up. But like that's what this guy does. So it is unfussy, but I want to say that is not to say that it's not artistic. There are clear conceptual shots in this movie that are quite impressive. I mean, like, for instance, you get the empty chair in the courtroom. That's significant. You get Lady Justice's statue right outside, and it's like plain as day. It's a little almost like on the nose, but it's kind of perfect. Uh, Whew. And then the ending sequence, which we'll talk about in a minute, there's that whole thing is rife with like great shots of like shot, counter shot, and what are the characters saying and not saying. All of that sort of stuff is going on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, again, one of his best film in years, and one that is actually like quite artistically rendered. So, okay, let's get to the ending now. All right, here's your full spoiler warning. If you don't want to know anything about the ending of the movie, then good for you. Like, go watch it. If you couldn't find this in one of the 38 theaters that it was in this country, it's dropping on Max super soon, and you should see it. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. But here we go. Let's progress or proceed with the ending. All right. I just want to say I love the ending. Let me walk you through it, okay? So things get a little crazy, and you're like, what's going on here? Simmons is like, wait a minute, guys. So what he does, and actually this is great stuff too, and talk about like institutional stuff. It reminded me of that, what was that old Netflix doc? It was like how to make a murderer, or how to frame a murderer, that kind of thing. It's all about confirmation bias, right? So the people decide what this thing is, how this thing unfolded, and who was at the center of it, and then they're looking for clues which like naturally confirm that actual bias that already exists. And that's kind of what happens to the guy that's being prosecuted in this case, the boyfriend. So you get an eyewitness, you tease to him that it was this guy, and then, oh yeah, I saw this guy by a bridge, right? Which is true, but was it that guy? Now things start to unfold or unwind a little bit when we actually look a little bit deeper. So you got confirmation bias playing in, and Simmons, his whole point is like, look, the cops aren't necessarily dastardly here. They're just not building an actual case based on the evidence. This is clearly a hit and run. Slam on the brakes. Now the movie's shifting. This is clearly a hit and run, not a girl getting bashed in the head and then thrown on the rocks by necessarily her boyfriend. Okay. And now Nicholas Hoult remembers that night he was in that bar. In fact, he's a former alcoholic, and he had lost his twin babies to a miscarriage and was thinking very hard about staring down that brown liquor in the glass in front of him and partaking. He doesn't do it. He witnesses the fight. He leaves. He drives home. Hits. He looks down at his phone to Zoe Deutsch, his beautiful pregnant bride, again, now that they're about to conceive. Again, hopefully, this baby comes to term. He gets a text, looks down, hits something, figures it's a deer, sees nothing on the side of the road, goes home. Same night, same bridge, same road. And now he's like, well, shit. I just hit this girl, right? So Simmons starts unfolding it. Now Holt has got to, he's got to play these machinations inside of this juror room. He's got to shift them from guilt to, hey, like let's question this. Let's peel apart that. Let's look at this. And as he's doing it, Simmons is like, yeah, hey, I ran the auto records on all these things that had accidents around this time. Would you take some of the papers? And it turns out, of course, his wife's vehicle, which he was driving that night, is there because he hit something. He needed to get the grill or the radiator or whatever fixed in the front of it. So, okay. I'm getting a little too deep in the weeds, but you can see there's a real story here. This is actually awesome. It's engaging stuff. It's titillating on its own. It doesn't need salaciousness. And so basically Simmons gets booted out through Holt's machinations, which is, again, like screwing the red tape. Like, we found a real element or agent of justice and they're just discarded unceremoniously. But he gets Toni Collette's ear. She's about to be DA. She needs this prosecution more than anyone needs anything else in the entire film. And she starts digging herself. Ooh, now her conscience comes to bear. And so the man is guilty. He's convicted as guilty, even though he didn't do it. Toni Collette walks out. She's now really sort of like heavy laden with what's happened. She sits down on the bench next to Nicholas Hoult, who now she believes is actually involved with his death. And they have one of those scenes where there's all these things being said, but what is not being said, the pregnant pauses, the internal machinations you're not hearing, those are more powerful than what is actually being articulated out loud. So he does that. He basically pleads with her not to pursue it further, like it was an accident. And I mean, he doesn't say this out loud, but I mean, you can pick it up. What if what happened was an accident and he doesn't want to walk away from his family, blah, blah, blah. It leaves. And so then the movie goes to him meeting his kid. And the point is that, like, all along, Eastwood is turning this back on us, right? There's no certainty of where it's going. We're existing in this gray. And people go, like, in the 90s, you're going to get a twist ending, right? The Pelican Brief, like, whoa, what happened? Okay, the firm. All right, so Hackman, okay. We're trying to figure it out. Okay, but here, the twist is actually, I think, more, it's not a twist, but it kind of is, because it's about what happens to Toni Collette's character, her follow-up to the follow-up, which is the final shot of the movie, which is that this dude has just encountered his son, and then he and his wife are debating what the traits that he physically has from his father, right? While he's internally processing that he just got off and that his character is like completely in question now because he didn't come forward, because he would have been arrested and assumed to be under a DUI, and he would have lost everything. So we're trying to figure out what to happen. He's staring at this kid. There's a knock on the door. He opens the door. It's Toni Collette. And then fade to black. Credits. Just freaking chef's kiss, man. Just a chef's kiss ending. Because you're like, well, what's going to happen? Is she going to reopen the case? Or did she just want to see him? Like, face to face, see him in his element with his family, look at him one more time and decide, did she want to upend everything, including possibly her own career, right? In order to do what was truly right. That's the twist ending to me. It's Colette's follow-up to the follow-up. But in all of this, we're just sitting in this soupy gray, and it never gets didactic at all. So, it's a powerful work that's grown upon me on reflection. I think the positive, I would say, is that it avoids all the sensationalism and melodrama. The thing just stays grounded throughout. And if you're looking for cons, you can find them. Look, One Shot Clint, some of the periphery characters here could have used a few more takes. I'll just say it that way. I mean, it's not as bad as the minor characters in Gran Torino, which is a film that my father absolutely adores, where the character actors, well, they're not character actors, they're just extras, and many of them are non-professional, and they're so naturalistic that I would just call them bad. But here it's not that. It's just not quite as crisp for some of the characters as Holt and Collette and Simmons and Messina and Deutsch and all the five leads. But then again, I think you could kind of argue that grounds the film in that middle deliberation, 12 Angry Men-ish section of the movie. And again, I think another con, if you're looking for something this is pretty down the middle, plot-wise. So if you were looking for something like Presumed Innocent, where the actual turn is like wild, you're going to find this to be maybe lackadaisical or down the middle. Because the difference is that the craziness of this film is not in the plotting, which is what you would have seen in the Grisham novels, right? The smoking guns and all that sort of stuff. The craziness is actually in the thematics. It's actually in the story. It's what we're thinking about moral relativism and whether truth exists and what's the right thing to do and how beholden are we to it in the judicial system. All of those blah, 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 big things. That's the stuff that is scintillating and like meaty, weighty stuff you can grab a hold of in this movie. Not, because I'll admit, I kept expecting someone to come off the top rope with that at the end. Like, oh, no, it wasn't him. Someone at the last minute slid in, and that's the person that hit her. And he really did hit a deer. Like, or just, that's what we expect when we watch The Usual Suspects and all of those 90s flicks that were doing those things to us. Primal Fear, right? Like, but not, no. Eastwood is going to play it down the middle, and in so doing, he's actually going to put the onus on us to render the verdict. And that, my friends, is a pretty powerful thing. So to conclude, like I said, he gives his audience quite a bit to mull over without forcing a decision on us. He lets it sit in this gray space, which is far more accurate to real life cases than, what we've seen before. It's kind of a search for truth in a world that may believe that the truth is out there, as the X-Files would have said. Speaking of, we're in the 90s a lot today, guys. I apologize. No, I mean, is the truth even, is it even available? Has it passed us by? I think that's a question that this film is wrestling with too. So, final scores. All right, what do we got? FOF rating, you guys know I do it. This movie started out as a solid 4 out of 5 stars for me, just because it's well made, well acted, it's engaging, it keeps you thinking throughout. It's risen for me as I've reflected on the deeper stuff. So I'm going to give it an FOF score of 4.2 out of 5 stars, probably somewhere near the bottom of my top 10 list, which will be coming out in a couple weeks. So, hey, that's all I've got for Juror number 2, but I would love your thoughts. Did you see it? Where did you find it? What did you think? Did you love the ending or hate it? And what else are you cooking up these days in the cinema world? Hey, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film. Until next time, stay firm, my friends.